I'm going to start today, the new year, with a quote by Sir Winston Churchill. In quotes, "Everyone is in favor of free speech. Hardly a day passes without it being extolled, but some people's idea of it is that they are free to say what they like. But if anyone else says anything back, that's an outrage." It's incredible that he said that, over 65 years ago. Well, I'm starting the new year talking about free speech for a few reasons. First off, this weekend is the 2-year anniversary of the murder of 12 people in the attack on the French magazine Charlie Hebdo. Since that tragic event, we've been witnessing a continued assault on free speech. And few of us seem to care, despite the fact that, as Thomas Jefferson said, free speech and freedom of the press form the foundation of all other freedoms. Now, I'm blown away how casual we are about it. I'm also talking about the increasing curtailment of free speech today because there's a direct correlation between freedom and economic prosperity. In the immediate aftermath of the Charlie Hebdo attack, I received a ton of angry responses to my comment that the "look at me, I'm in favor of free speech" parades and the hashtag "we're all Charlie Hebdo" and other pronouncements were utter horse manure. Typical posing, no substance, all style. And sadly, in the interim 2 years, I feel vindicated. That statement was total BS. Where were these people when Condoleezza Rice, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and Canadian-born physicist Robert Bourgeois were prevented from speaking on American campuses, or when Ann Coulter was prevented from speaking at Ottawa U, or Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu from speaking at Concordia, or National Post columnist Christy Blatchford from speaking at Waterloo? Now, I appreciate that most people don't seem to care. Even more troubling is the significant number of people who think that people shouldn't be allowed to present their views if they're different from their own. Famous case in point is David Suzuki, darling of the progressive set, who has clearly stated that people who don't subscribe to his own specific, many times ill-informed view of global warming should be in jail. Now, I didn't consider it a small thing when Prime Minister Trudeau lauded Cuban dictator Fidel Castro, head of a regime that has been constantly condemned for restricting free speech, jailing political opponents, jailed 8,600 in 2015 alone, and other human rights abuses chronicled by Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. No free press, no free speech, the jailing and executing of political opponents, forced gay re-education camps still qualified, in Mr. Trudeau's eyes, as serving his people with dedication and love. The leader of Canada showed little interest in defending free speech, not just in the case of lauding a notorious dictator, but in other instances. Do you remember him naming China as the country he most admired? Come on. Sadly, I think his nonchalant attitude toward free speech is reflected in the attitude of a huge number of Canadians and Americans. Just before Christmas, you probably missed this. The University of Oregon issued a warning to its faculty that if anyone said things about race, sexual orientation, sex, religion that people found offensive, they could be suspended or even fired. Last week, at the University of British Columbia, a speech by John Furlong, former head of the Vancouver 210 Winter Olympics, was canceled. Why? Because he was falsely accused of sexual and physical abuse decades earlier while teaching at a residential school. In case you've forgotten, of the 3 people who filed a civil suit against Mr. Furlong, one was found not to have attended the school at all. Another had already collected over $120,000 from the feds over sexual abuse allegations that had taken place at another school at the same time he alleged Mr. Furlong had abused him. Not surprisingly, that suit was gone. And the third complainant just dropped her suit. Now, I'm not doing justice how thoroughly discredited the accusations are, or the scathing review by the Supreme Court judge of the journalist who wrote the story in the Georgia Strait. My point here today is that UBC rescinded the invitation for Mr. Furlong to speak because of what Christy Blatchford, the National Post's excellent columnist, wrote, was a complaint by one sexual assault activist. That's all it took for UBC to say no to free speech on campus. What a disgrace. The incidences of intolerance and heavy-handed efforts to prevent anyone with an opinion does not strictly adhere to the progressive agenda from expressing it are just way too many to mention. The evidence is overwhelming that the right to free speech has been superseded by institutionalized political correctness when you talk about public education, the mainstream media, and other public institutions. Consider that political theory professor, Ross Emmett. He's a director at the Michigan School for Innovation and Economic Prosperity. Well, he was aggressively targeted. Why? Because he brought students together to discuss competing political economy ideas. Art Hall, who runs the Center for Applied Economics at the University of Kansas Business School, was forced to file a lawsuit to try to stop a state records request from student activists demanding his private email correspondence for the last 10 years. His crime? He testified against green energy quotas at the state legislature in 2014. What I'm saying today is not eloquent. I'm not pretending it is, or particularly insightful. It's simply a call to you to stand up and be counted. You better defend free speech before it's gone. Everyone's free speech. You know, some very nasty people want to take it away from us all. And as Thomas Paine, you know him as one of America's founding fathers, declared in quotes, those who expect to reap the blessings of freedom must undergo the fatigues of supporting it. If you value your freedom to speak your mind, it's time to oppose those that want to take that right away from you.